Thank you. As Christina said, I'm Andrew Clark. I'm the Transit Program Manager with the Greater Portland Council of Governments. I'm very happy to lead a discussion here about the connection between land use decisions and transportation decisions, because so many times those decisions are made separately, and then sometimes we end up with pictures, good pictures that you see, and sometimes we're ending up with some of the badder pictures, the worst pictures that you see. So anyways, I'm very happy to be, is my mic on? Check. How's this? There's no monitor up here, so we're just kind of, all right, thanks guys. I'm very happy to be joined on stage by Mike Tremblay. He's the Director of Transit Development, Greater Portland Metro, and Andrew Zarro, Executive Director at the Bicycle Coalition of Maine. So thanks guys for joining us. And so to dive right in here, transportation is about more than cars. It is about more than roads for cars to drive on and parking lots for cars to park in when they're not being driven. Both Metro and the Bike Coalition are working to build a comprehensive multimodal transportation system. So Mike, let me start with you, and you can tell us a little bit about what's going on at Metro right now. What is the vision and how are you working towards this regional multimodal vision?
Yeah, so we have a lot going on in Metro. We had some discussion earlier about us expanding into Scarborough. I know we had some Scarborough staff here earlier. So this year we'll be expanding fixed route and a microtransit zone into Scarborough. So really adding a new community to the transit network that has relatively small amount of service today. But we're also working on improving our bus routes in South Portland, which joined Metro a little over a year ago. And those routes really hadn't been changed in 30 or 40 years. And so obviously things have changed both in the housing pattern, but other development patterns in South Portland. And so we're really excited to dive in and really try and optimize the transit network to work for not only the folks living and working in South Portland today, but the future of housing and development in South Portland.
And Andrew, kind of the same question for you from the walking and biking perspective. What are you guys doing to make those active transportation options viable options for transportation in the region?
Yeah, important question. Bicycle Coalition of Maine, for those of you who are unfamiliar, we are entering our 34th year of being an organization. We are the advocacy organization for all things active transportation for the state of Maine. We are statewide, all 16 counties. I drive a lot for someone who is the executive director of the Bicycle Coalition of Maine. We just wrapped 2025, which, not to start on a dark note, but it was an extremely deadly and dangerous year for vulnerable road users. There were over 450 bike or pedestrian involved crashes throughout the state of Maine last year. There were 24 pedestrian fatalities, several of them in the city of Portland, and there were 5 cyclist fatalities. I tell you that to tell you that our work is very much urgent work. People think of cycling as, oh, it's a recreational thing. And that's a huge part of the problem. And we're going to spend the next 25 minutes diving into a little bit some of that. Multimodal transportation, active transportation is a viable and should be treated as a viable option for people to get to and from where they're going. And we often work collaboratively with public transportation options as, for that first and last mile. But BCM works also quite a bit in education. We've worked with many of the municipalities that are in this room with our bike ped education, and our biggest partner in that is the Department of Transportation. I saw Joyce here a moment ago, and we couldn't do that work without that partnership. It's essential. We also partner with organizations like the Greater Portland Council of Governments on traffic calming measures, or like the Safe Streets for All, which many of you are familiar with. So we also do events too, but now it's not the appropriate time for me to talk to you about our events. But encouragement, getting people on bike and on foot safely. Our mission is to get people in the state of Maine, all those who walk, bike, and roll safely and with joy.
I think the most obvious intersection between transit and active transportation and housing development is transit-oriented development. So Mike, could you provide an overview of transit-oriented development, and sort of what it seeks to accomplish?
Yeah, so transit-oriented development is sort of exactly what it sounds like. It's a hopefully mixed-use development, housing, places to work, places to shop, places to play that are located approximately and supported by transit, hopefully more than one transit route or a frequent and fast transit route. The idea of transit-oriented development is that rather than defaulting to 2 cars per household, everyone's driving everywhere, really making sure that the development works under the assumption that most people are going to be making many of their primary trips, especially via transit or another active transportation mode. And so the benefits of transit-oriented development, for example, you might not have to build that much parking for per unit in a TOD zone. Anybody know the approximate cost of a parking space in a development like this? Per $1,000 to $3,000 for a surface lot, and it skyrockets up to about $20,000 if you're doing structured parking. And so, if you can reduce the cost of parking in a development, the housing associated with that can be a lot more inexpensive. And so you can get the economies of scale of shared parking. If you have businesses, offices kind of bundled with housing, you can share those parking spaces. There's a lot of other benefits as well related to the length of your trips. You might be able to spend your entire day in that one area, and never have to use the external road network at all. So if you bundle a bunch of those together, then now all of a sudden you have a dense urban environment where almost all of your trips can be made by walking, biking, or transit. So we're really encouraging our communities to zone TOD. In Portland, I know Portland recently did their recode a year or so ago where they added several TOD zones, and I know more of our communities are doing similar work.
So when we looked at some of the places that have gotten TOD right, like a Boston or a Portland, Oregon, or a Cleveland or Austin, Texas, whatever it is, and we bring that back, we're often met with a lot of well, that's not going to work here. We're not like those places, and we're not big enough, and whatever. So how do you counter those kind of narratives, and what do you think, from your perspective as a transit provider, are the real opportunities and what is an achievable success?
Yeah, so it's true. We're not Boston, we're not New York City, but we can scale a similar solution. We are working on a bus rapid transit network between Portland and Gorham via Westbrook. That will, the plan is to provide 10-minute service between Portland and Westbrook and 20-minute service beyond into Gorham. That level of service, that frequency, that speed is really what can make transit competitive with driving a car. And the idea of that rapid transit network is not just a bus that comes every 10 or 15 minutes. The service is fast, it's prioritized at intersections. There's dedicated bus lanes, or there's lanes that allow buses to jump through the queue and get around long lines of traffic. There's stations that have amenities like heated waiting areas that are enclosed. There's off-board fare payments, so you can just jump on the bus once it arrives. It feels like a light rail system, like a Green Line in Boston, for example, even though it doesn't have the upfront investment of rail and large train sets that take years and millions of dollars to build. So that's the kind of solution that is appropriate for the Portland region, and that's what we're trying to pursue here in this decade. And so we're actively working on a planning project to design that network, and working with our communities in Portland, Gorham, and Westbrook to determine exactly what that route does and the decision points along the way where the stations go, and really provide that corridor along Brighton Ave, Main Street, and Westbrook and into Gorham, where you can really encourage these TOD zones to pop up. If you build a development along this corridor, anybody who lives or works there or wants to play there or shop there can use this line where a bus will be coming every 10 or 15 minutes in order to get to and from that location. And now if you have 4 or 5 of those, or the whole corridor is lined with these types of developments, then all of a sudden you can do a whole lot with the transit network and not even have to own a car. So that's what we're working on.
And it's almost like we're trying to push through this chicken and egg problem, where you need the density for that level of development and that level of transit service to be viable, but you don't get that density because that service kind of isn't there. So this age-old question in providing the transit service. Andrew, there's a similar situation, I think, on the active transportation side. Some of these myths that we have to kind of tear down. One is, Portland, for example, is too hilly, so I don't want to drive around because I don't want to bike around because it's too hilly.
E-bikes.
Or the other one, is that it's cold in the wintertime. But there are other places that have solved these problems, right? Tear those myths down right now.
I'm going to look at Councilor Bullitt because I'm sure you hear this all the time in Portland. So yes, it's winter. There's snow outside. It's been like that for a while. It's a good thing. Winter is not the real barrier to this issue. It's poor maintenance. It's poorly designed infrastructure. It's not keeping up with the investments that our tax dollars are supposed to go to. What's the expression that I heard? I'm from Vermont originally, but when I moved to Maine, my boss said there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad gear. And that applies to this as well. I think that there is oftentimes a culture that I've encountered in my work and in other work of what you said, which is, we just can't do that. And that's a big part of the shift that we're tackling statewide when it comes to investing in active transportation. It's not a zero sum. If you invest in a bike lane, for example, you're not taking away from a car's autonomy and agency to get around. You're just giving more options to people. And you're doing it in a way that actually invests in other parts of our communities as well. I mean, there's a lot of data that shows the positive economic impact to main streets. If you put a bike lane in front of a business versus not, that business is going to see more revenue generation. So I think we do have a culture of, if you did that in a big city, it's not going to work here. Portland is continuing to have its ongoing identity of, is it a big town or is it a small city? That's for others to deal with at this point. But when it comes to investing in active transportation infrastructure, I'm not just talking about bike lanes, I'm talking about sidewalks, street lighting, making sure, if you want to know if your community cares about pedestrians and active transportation, go see how long it takes for sidewalks to be shoveled or salted after a snowstorm. You very quickly realize how that community feels about pedestrians because it's just very obvious. It's right there for you to see. And I think we need to have more conversations about the fact that it's not, not everyone has access to a car. People might not want a car. People might take public transportation, but investing in bike ped infrastructure expands what public transit does. You will open up an entire neighborhood that you might not have access to otherwise. So I think having those conversations when it comes to appointed and elected officials, one thing we really like to do in communities is take them on visualization engagements. So we will take city councilors and mayors on a bike ride. We'll do a bike audit or a walk audit. We did a bunch of them last year. We'll do a bunch more this year. If you want one, please reach out to me. But it's a really great opportunity to get decision makers to interact with their community to see what works and what doesn't. We launched a bikeability map in Portland this last year, where we worked very closely with people who commute. We wanted to hear from them. We had lots and lots of maps. All right, what works about this intersection, what doesn't? And we're going to expand that to the greater Portland region this summer. So stay tuned if you're not in Portland, but you're in greater Portland. I think we just have to continuously show people that it's not either or, and that, again, at the end of the day, these are your communities. Your investment, your tax dollars should be going towards good infrastructure. That in the context of today's conversation is accompanying more housing because the need is there.
And tacking on to that, think about the best bike cities in North America. Yeah, you have your Davis, Californias and all that, but right. Montreal, Minneapolis, Cambridge, they all have winter, and and the bikes don't go away in the winter. They're still there. So it's a question of prioritization and building the right type of infrastructure. So
absolutely, we should all go to Montreal together.
I'm down.
Let's do it.
Road trip. So Andrew, room full of municipal staff, elected officials, developer community. What do you say is sort of a non-negotiable baseline of active transportation infrastructure to put in place?
Ooh.
And then, Mike, I'm going to come to you, and you can talk about how transit is going to plug into that.
All right. Thanks for the warning.
I would say Okay, a non-negotiable, if I'm very mission aligned right now, is a building shouldn't be open until there is a active transportation, vulnerable road user specific venue for them to get to and from that building that doesn't involve a vehicle. If we're talking about dense neighborhoods, we're talking about like the building in downtown Portland. That's how you should be prioritizing this. Think about who's going to move in there and how can you do everything to make sure they don't need a car, whether or not they want one or have access to one. That's, in general, I would say the advice is plan for the most vulnerable road user in your community. So if it's for a kiddo or someone who's elderly, if you can make it safe and comfortable for them, it's going to work for everyone else. But yeah, I mean, I would like to think we have that kind of sway over at the Bicycle Coalition. I would say the non-negotiable is don't build for the car. Cities, towns, they are not for cars, they are for people. And so that's who you should be prioritizing.
Yeah, I think the best way to do that is to avoid sprawl, right? Avoid having the subdivision where your driveways are a mile from the major corridor. It's going to be really hard to design a bike-friendly, walkable, transit-friendly neighborhood that is 2 miles away from the major corridor that doesn't have a whole lot around it. It's difficult to, we get requests from developments or from subdivisions where, hey, we have people asking for the bus. Can you build a bus stop in front at our development? And there's nothing around it, right? It's extremely expensive, and it's hard to prioritize that expansion of service when you have other priorities in your network when you're trying to build to a development that is off the beaten path. And so if you're building your housing and other developments as close to and along those major corridors, I know the land is more expensive, but if you can build the density there, it's a lot easier to expand that transit route or prioritize bicycle lanes or widen that sidewalk when there's already that infrastructure there, and all you have to do is make it a little bit better. So.
And just to add on that, I think this sort of picks up on what the last panel was about. If infrastructure has to keep up with policy, and so if we are moving policy that is prioritizing housing development, which is a good thing, we need that. We have to do the same with infrastructure investment, because if we don't, we're going to see more congestion. We're going to see more bike ped crashes. We're going to see inconsistencies in ridership. So those two have to go together. And I think we're kind of seeing in real time, we are, as we should, prioritizing housing, but we have to do the same thing with infrastructure, or we're going to start to see a greater discrepancy that's going to result in lots of other tension points.
You touched on parking, Mike, and talk about a vicious cycle, right? So we drive, so we need parking spots, and those take up space, which pushes things further apart. So now we need to drive more, so now we need parking, right? So tell us a little bit about how these strategies can push against and can sort of push against that. And really, we're trying to solve what is often referred to as the first and last mile problem, right? But where land use and transportation decisions are really two sides of the same coin. And if land use is where you put things and transportation is how you connect those things that you've just put down, well, if you put things in the right place in the first point, the second problem becomes a lot easier to solve.
One thing that I think is a really winning strategy is, and this is a bit beyond my level of expertise, so I apologize to the planners in the room if I'm getting some of this wrong, but orienting development to the street and not to the parking lot is really important. Putting the parking lot, most developments are going to have some level of parking, right? But making sure that parking lot is not the thing that's between the sidewalk and the building, but putting that parking behind the building so that it's still a walkable environment. You have a driveway that leads into that parking lot, but it's tucked behind the building. You manage your access appropriately so that people walking and people biking aren't having to deal with driveway after driveway after driveway leading to different strip malls and whatnot. I think there's a way you can provide for that parking in the short term while also planning a walkable and bikeable and transit-friendly area. And so I do agree that the parking requirements aren't going to go away overnight. However, there are communities, including Portland, that have removed the parking minimums, and I think that's a fantastic step forward. Developers know how many parking spaces they need. The municipality prescribing that a larger minimum than that is often counterproductive. And so that's a great step forward that Portland took a year or two ago now. But to the extent that you need parking, making sure that it's not disrupting any kind of walkable and bikeable activity that you have is a big important step.
I think we're at the time where we'd like to open it up for Q&A. So again, Lucy and Becca are here with mics if anybody has questions. Don't let us be the first ones who don't have any Q&A.
While we're thinking of some questions, one thing I wanted to add, and I apologize if the speaker touched on this last session, we were out getting mic'd up. One of the biggest challenges with transit in Maine is that we have no dedicated funding source. We get as much as we can from the state, through DOT. We get as much as we can from the federal government, which is stagnant today. And everything else that we can't get out of fare revenue comes from local municipal assessments, right? So if we're talking about expanding transit, we're talking about building a new transit route or adding a microtransit zone. For the most part, the host municipalities of that transit service are going to be hit hard. We do our best to try and provide some startup funding, but for the most part, it's hard to get that funding for the most to get those services launched. And so we're going to be pushing hard for the ability for municipalities to add local option sales tax, meals taxes, lodging, hotel taxes, ways to extract some money out of the tourism industry to the best that we can. Again, I'm outside of my realm here, but we recognize that local taxpayers are stretched thin right now, and there's a lot of local priorities, as we've heard today. How can we be creative about funding these transit services that will help the people who live here while also not hitting them in the pocketbooks as much?
Mike and Andrew, thanks for sharing your knowledge on this topic today. Beyond Portland and the sort of downtown area, are there places that you're seeing this type of development that you're describing successfully emerging? Like, any kind of success stories that you can point to, whether it be in the region or maybe in New England more broadly. Mike, you kind of described what could be from Gorham to Westbrook to Portland, but isn't yet. Maybe some other examples of where that kind of development is taking shape.
Yeah, I think the Rock Road development on the Westbrook on the Portland line is a great example. They have been knocking down our door for a way for us to provide not just transit along Main Street and Brighton Ave, but also turning into their site and providing a transit hub on their site. There's a lot of potential for a lot of mixed-use development there beyond what they've already done. The Downs is another example in Scarborough. They've also been really asking us to provide direct transit service there. There's certainly things that might be improved about both of those developments for sure, but for the most part, they're building dense transit supportive developments and they're trying to invite us there, and we're doing our best to meet them there where they are.
One that comes to mind from bike ped infrastructure investment is in Biddeford. A lot of the development that happened around the Pepperell Mill and then behind, we did a walk audit and a bike audit with them this summer. And it's really impressive to see the infrastructure investment around streetlights, really quality sidewalks. Just making, if you haven't walked around downtown Biddeford recently, go for it. They really did make sure that was a priority so that if people are going to be living in downtown Biddeford, they can get around safely and enjoy it. That's important. That's an important part of this. You want to give people who are biking and walking the ability to get to and from where they're going safely, but it also needs to be interesting, consistent. And Biddeford, I think, just did a really great job with as they continue to prioritize housing and grow. And I'm not just saying that because the speaker is from Biddeford.
Thanks. How do we engage more with the builders of housing to help the builders of housing understand that there is, in fact, a market for housing that's more built around other types of transportation as opposed to just cars?
So often I think that conversation happens before I'm involved, and some of which is by design, but I also I encourage the people who are working on development review in all of our member municipalities to get us involved very early on, right? Oftentimes, by the time transit's even brought up, it's too late. What frustrates me a lot is when, a building permit's been issued or even a certificate of occupancy's been issued in a place that doesn't have transit or doesn't have robust enough transit. The project's been approved, and now, okay, Metro, what can you do? And it's, well, it would have been great to have the developer help chip in for that service or suggest that the building be oriented in a different way or, improve that bus stop in front of the building that they just developed. And oftentimes by the time it's occupied or even approved, it's too late. So really get us in the room early on. I'm happy to go to meetings about developments and talk about that stuff. And I'm sure Andrew is as well. Long story short, involve us early and often. So.
Maybe one more from Milan.
Hey, thanks for the comments so far. I'm curious how much of the solution and moving towards more active transportation as part of day-to-day life do you feel we need to get into the realm of making car ownership painful? In the realm of zoning, it's things like parking maximums. There's more dense areas looking at things like congestion pricing and all that arena of things. And in general, we haven't taken that step. I'm not advocating for that step. I'm just curious, as experts in your fields and where you're going, how much of that do we need in order to start shifting the norms? Or is it really the focus just needs to be exclusively on making the bike ped option or the transit option, beautiful, desirable. I hear often about, well, we can't just have a crummy transit hub. It has to be a place that people want to be. Let's beautify the buses. Let's have an education campaign. Let's have a marketing campaign. Let's make it comfortable. And those are all great. I just wonder how far you feel that would actually take us in getting us where we need to be, and how much of it needs to be done by the kind of painful side of it.
I think there are a couple of ways you can take a bite at that apple. And I think it is subjective to the community in which you're working in. Sticks and carrots. We want to make the investment in active transportation. So we want really nice sidewalks. We want designated low-stress bike lanes that are not in the middle of Forest Ave where we're asking a lot of paint lately. People, I don't know if you've noticed, don't really pay attention to those. So you said it, I'm paraphrasing you, but you said, how do we make having a car painful? And I hear you. I think it's how are we going to do that in an effective way? One thing that comes to mind immediately that is not as aggressive as congestion pricing, because I just don't think Portland has the population density for that, is have any of you heard of 20 is plenty? A couple of hands, cool. Okay, so for the most part in the state of Maine, municipalities can't regulate speed limits, but there is a growing movement now because of what's been going on in Portland over the last couple of years and the number of fatalities and serious injuries is how can municipalities start to say that they want to regulate their own speed limits. And if the city of Portland was able to figure it out so that municipally owned streets could only have 20 miles an hour speed limits, that might make drivers think twice about going as fast as they go. Speed is a huge problem in the state of Maine. People drive so fast constantly, and they're distracted. We've had many conversations about that. So maybe I don't want to make it uncomfortable or what's the word you used?
Painful.
Painful, because I just feel like all we do is focus on pain and the ramifications around cars. But I want to make it intentional. I want municipalities to look at real policies that regulate speed, that prioritize design, that don't obsess over as much parking as humanly possible. And I want them to just think about the vulnerable road user first. And when they do that, they are going to slowly start to make the changes that communities need to see. Maine has been around for a while. We have a lot of downtowns that existed before the automobile. So this isn't a crazy concept for us. We can have both of those things coincide together and be really intentional with our policy. But if a council or a select board wanted to reach out and say, hey, what are some things we could do? I will be at that meeting.
To me, it's not about inflicting pain or making things uncomfortable. It's appropriately prioritizing, right? Cars that take up a lot of space. I think everybody's seen that image where it's the amount of space that 40 cars take up and the amount of space that 40 people on bikes takes up, and it's much, much smaller. And then it's 40 people in a bus is one bus, right? And so I think people often think about how much, there's so much congestion. How many people are in those cars? A lot less than you might think. 1.1 people per car for an auto commute. So perhaps we talk about dedicated transit lanes or queue jumps or or whatnot, maybe that 4-lane road doesn't need to be 4 lanes, right? Maybe there need to be some road diets to help redistribute that right of way, which is often very limited, especially in Greater Portland, to other road users. And so I think that resetting that conversation around just making sure that we're prioritizing people and not vehicle throughput is often it's a tough conversation to have because it often means more delay for people that are in the room. But it's also preparing for the next phase of our region, which is hopefully more people walking and biking and taking transit.
And just to add on that, because I know we're out of time, is if we make it a little bit more challenging to drive everywhere, but we increase the ability to take public transit or walk or bike, again, not a zero-sum thing, you are not losing something, you are gaining more. And I think that's just a really important thing to throw out there.
Well, Andrew, Mike, thank you guys. Let's hear it for them.
Thank you.